100 billion barrels of crude oil buried beneath Burkina Faso's dust have just detonated the world's energy map, not discovered by Shell, not auctioned by the IMF, but claimed, owned, and weaponized by a 36-year-old soldier who's not asking for permission. This is not just oil. This is a warning shot to every empire that ever fed off Africa's silence. President Ibrahim Traoré didn't announce this discovery with fanfare. He didn't host a Western press conference. He assembled his engineers, summoned his generals, and declared war on dependency on exploitation on history itself. Because when you hold more oil than the UAE, but you're landlocked, underestimated and uninvited to the global table, you don't beg for a seat. You flip the table, and that's exactly what Traoré is doing. As the world reels, Burkina Faso is moving fast, fierce and fearless. Oil rigs built by Burkinabe hands, pipelines protected by Burkinabe troops, wealth returned to Burkinabe villages, and a message loud enough to shake Wall Street. This time Africa keeps what's under its feet. This is not a drill. This is the start of a new oil doctrine, one that may destroy the old rules and write new ones in crude black ink. Have you ever felt your heart shatter from watching Africa bleed? Children starving, land exploited, dignity stolen. We've endured enough. Now we rise strong, united, unbreakable. Share this video so the world hears us. For God, for justice, for a free sovereign Africa, let our cry echo. And this is where the story truly begins. Not in the boardrooms of Brussels, nor in the offices of oil cartels, but in the red soil of Burkina Faso, where history cracked open and revealed a different future. A future not begged for but built, not granted but claimed. For centuries Africa has given and given while being told it owns nothing. We dug gold from our mountains only to see it melted into rings worn in palaces we would never enter. We bled rubber from our forests while our children walked barefoot. And now beneath the sun-scorched plains of the Sahel there are 100 billion barrels of oil. But this time something is different. This time there's a leader who won't blink. Ibrahim Traoré did not stumble into power, he rose into it with the weight of generations behind him. And when the oil was discovered, he didn't run to foreign banks or global forums. He turned inward, to his people, to his soil. He summoned his energy council, not to auction off the discovery but to protect it, not to sell it but to own it. Traoré understood what this oil represented. It wasn't just energy, it was equity. It was the chance to rewrite Africa's most painful equation: natural wealth minus sovereignty equals exploitation. He refused to repeat that formula. And so, Petro-Sahel was born not as a replica of Exxon or Shell, but as a mirror of Burkinabe resolve. An oil company created for and by the people. Its mission was simple, but revolutionary: keep control. Extract with conscience and invest with pride. Foreign investors were told no backdoor deals, no colonial contracts. You want to profit? Train our youth, reinforce our grid, return a third of what you take. It was bold, it was unorthodox, and it was deeply African. In towns like Dori and Fada Ngoma, people began speaking new words with old power. The oil is ours. No longer whispers of resentment, but chants of reclamation. For those of us in the diaspora, it struck something deeper. We've spent years watching Africa from a distance, hearing its heartbreak through statistics. But this felt like healing, like the continent finally speaking in its own voice. This is no longer a pipeline for profit. This is a pipeline for pride. And when the oil flows, it will not flow into foreign accounts. It will irrigate schools, fund hospitals, and illuminate futures. Because this time the hands that hold the drills also hold the pen. This is not charity. This is justice. This is not fantasy. This is Africa rising. But dreams, no matter how bold, require protection. And in Africa, where dreams are often stolen before they mature, that protection must be deliberate, disciplined, and uncompromising. Ibrahim Traoré knew this. He's not just a reformer with vision, he's a soldier with memory, a memory sharpened by the patterns of history. From the oil fields of Nigeria to the diamond mines of Sierra Leone, Africa has seen what happens when natural wealth is left unguarded. Mercenaries flood in corporations, strike deals behind closed doors, and the people are left with polluted rivers and broken promises. So before a single barrel was extracted, Traoré moved. He launched Operation Black Shield, a full-scale national defense initiative designed to secure every inch of the newly discovered oil territory. Not with hired guns from overseas, but with Burkinabe soldiers trained in energy asset defense. Drones now sweep the skies. Ground patrols move with purpose. Radar towers rise beside rigs like modern-day sentinels. These aren't tools of paranoia, they're symbols of sovereignty. Because in this era of Africa rising, security is not optional, it is foundational. But Traoré's brilliance lies not only in defense but in design. He understands that oil can be a curse if it flows in the wrong direction toward corruption, toward elite pockets away from the people. So alongside military preparation, he crafted a radical economic blueprint rooted in redistribution, not just revenue. Under his national oil doctrine, a minimum of 30% of oil profits must remain in Burkina Faso. Not lost in bureaucracy, but directly injected into public infrastructure, schools, hospitals, clean water, energy grids. More than that, every foreign company operating on Burkinabe soil must reinvest into local communities, provide skills training, and help transition the economy toward long-term independence. Imagine the power of that. Imagine a boy from Gawa learning to engineer refineries instead of running from his village. Imagine a mother in Kaya receiving steady income from a local development fund tied directly to oil revenue. This is not development dictated by outsiders, it's transformation built by insiders. And that transformation is already visible. Schools once neglected are being retooled for petroleum science. Clinics are being expanded. Engineers are being trained not in Geneva or London but in Bobo Dioulasso and Ouagadougou. This is not just about building an oil industry, it's about building a Burkinabe future brick by brick, bite by bite, barrel by barrel. All of this speaks to something bigger than energy policy. It speaks to the rebirth of responsibility. A moment where African leadership is no longer reactive, but strategic. A moment where the guns of the past give way to the blueprints of the future. This is what Africa Rising looks like, not just in speeches, but in systems. Not in slogans, but in steel and soil. In protected pipelines and protected people. In a continent that no longer begs for protection, but provides it. This is not just Burkina Faso standing guard. It is Africa finally standing tall. While the world watched Burkina Faso's oil discovery with wide eyes and sharpened pens, Ibrahim Traoré was already writing a different kind of chapter. Because he knew that oil, no matter how vast, would mean nothing if the people had no power, not just electrical but intellectual. And so before he summoned foreign oil executives, he summoned educators. He asked the most important question any leader can ask in the age of extraction: what good is wealth if your people cannot manage it themselves? His answer was swift, strategic, and deeply personal. Almost overnight, vocational schools across the country were transformed into petrochemical training centers. Universities in Ouagadougou, Koudougou, and Bobo Dioulasso launched fast-track degrees in petroleum law, drilling engineering, and upstream logistics. More than classrooms, this was about consciousness. Scholarships were handed out not just to elite urban students, but to children from rural villages, many of them sitting directly above the oil. These were communities that had long been told they were too poor to matter, now being told they were vital to the future. A girl in Fada Ngoma mastering refinery design. A boy in Dori learning to negotiate global energy contracts. This wasn't education, it was empowerment. And in a continent that has too often watched its talent exported and exploited, this was revolutionary. This is the first sign of Africa reborn. But Traoré didn't stop there. While critics scoffed, and Western media accused him of ignoring climate priorities, he unveiled the second half of his plan. A vision even more radical, using oil not to delay the green transition but to fund it. He created a green transition fund. Every barrel of oil sold would directly contribute to solar megaprojects, wind farms, and hydropower stations across the nation. Side by side with the rigs, solar grids began to rise. On land once marked for resource theft, clean energy hubs now emerged. Schools were lit by sun, clinics powered by renewables. The same black oil that had cursed other nations was now being used to light the path forward. This wasn't contradiction, it was clarity. In Traoré's Burkina Faso, the goal is not to choose between fossil fuel and renewable energy, but to build the bridge between them. a bridge wide enough to carry a generation from dependence to dominance, from darkness to light. That is not just innovation, it is cultural restoration. For the African diaspora watching from afar, this was the moment we dared to hope. Not only could we return home, but we could return to something that made sense, that had structure, vision, and soul. Not a copy of Europe or a facsimile of Asia, but an African model. One that grows with the sun, learns from the earth, and guards its wealth with wisdom. This is more than a development model. This is identity reimagined. This is how we build not just an oil industry, but a nation worthy of the dreams buried beneath it. This is the quiet, confident architecture of a new future. This is Africa reborn. The discovery of oil in Burkina Faso didn't just shake up the local economy, it sent a shockwave through the balance of global power. In Washington, they called emergency meetings. In Paris, diplomats flew to Ouagadougou with veiled intentions. In Riyadh and Beijing, analysts recalibrated entire strategies. Why? Because this wasn't just a pile of barrels. This was leverage. This was leadership. This was a new African nation standing up and saying, "We will not play by your rules. We will write our own." What frightened the world wasn't the oil, it was the audacity. The audacity of a young African leader who refused to sell, who refused to beg, who refused to submit. Traoré didn't just manage a discovery, he weaponized dignity. And that dignity is now contagious. Across Africa, the message is echoing. Mali is aligning. Guinea is discussing joint energy corridors. Algeria is watching with cautious optimism. What Traoré has triggered is not just a movement, it's a moment. A moment of reckoning. A moment of remembering that African wealth belongs in African hands. That African voices must shape African futures. This is not just the rise of Burkina Faso, this is a call for African unity. But Traoré's brilliance lies in how he brings power to the people, not just headlines. Long before the first drop was extracted, he flew to the villages, sitting atop the reserves. Not with bodyguards and scripts, but with open hands and honest intentions. He asked not for land, but for partnership. He promised not relocation, but restoration. And he delivered. In communities once ignored by national maps, new clinics now rise. Clean water systems are being installed. Women's cooperatives are receiving microloans funded directly from oil dividends. Young men once targeted by extremist groups are now training as engineers, electricians, and refinery operators. The oil isn't just filling national coffers, it's flooding the grassroots with hope. This isn't charity. This is justice. This is what it looks like when the first to suffer are the first to benefit. And so to the African diaspora watching from London, from Brussels, from Toronto, this is your invitation. Your homeland is no longer a museum of misery. It is a construction site of rebirth, a frontier of possibility. This is not the Africa they showed you in textbooks. This is the one your grandparents whispered about when they said, "One day." That day is here. Burkina Faso is no longer waiting for fairness. It is building power. And through that power, it is rewriting the narrative of an entire continent. No longer the beggar, no longer the broken, but the builder, the beacon, the beginning. This is the story of a people rediscovering their purpose. A leader reminding the world that Africa is not a place to exploit, it is a place to respect. This is the rise of a nation, but more importantly, the resurrection of a continent. This is Africa rising. This is African unity in motion. And this is just the beginning. I am a child of Africa. My skin is kissed by the sun, my hands bear the calluses of generations that tilled soil, others claimed, and my memory is stitched with the whispers of ancestors who dreamt of freedom but died in silence. I come from a land rich in diamonds, gold and oil, yet I've seen my people hungry, barefoot and begging. That is the wound we carry, a wound wrapped not only in suffering but in shame. And for too long we've been told that this was normal, that this was Africa's fate. But not anymore. Something is shifting in the wind, something ancient, yet urgent. I feel it rising beneath my feet, flowing through the rivers of the Sahel, echoing in the voice of a young soldier turned leader who dares to say what others only whispered. I hear it in the oil rigs built by Burkinabe hands, in the voices of girls mastering petroleum lore, in the solar panels that power villages once forgotten. It is not a slogan. It is not propaganda. It is a pulse, a new heartbeat. This is Africa rising. When I first heard of Ibrahim Traoré's vision, I cried. Not because it was perfect, but because it was possible. And in Africa, possibility is a revolution. He didn't just find oil, he found our dignity buried beneath the dust. He didn't just drill into the ground, he drilled into our collective soul and pulled up a long-lost truth: we are enough. For generations, we exported genius and imported shame. Our best minds fled to Europe, washing dishes under neon lights, while foreign consultants wrote the future of their homelands. Our farmers knew the land better than satellites, yet their children died of hunger. Our leaders signed contracts they didn't read in languages they never owned. But now the page is turning. This is the dawn of the new Africa. In the new Africa, we no longer wait for development to trickle down, we build from the ground up. In the new Africa, oil revenues don't vanish in Swiss accounts, they fund hospitals and train engineers. In the new Africa, our villages don't get displaced, they get empowered. Traoré didn't just bring oil, he brought a blueprint. And that blueprint speaks to all of us, those at home, and those scattered across the diaspora. It says, come back, come build, come believe. I was raised in Europe. I swept train stations in Paris while my grandfather's village sat on gold. I wore a uniform with someone else's name, while my cousin, a brilliant mechanic, was told he had no future. I sat in classrooms where African history was a footnote, but today I sit with pride, because I see what we always knew we could be. I see Africa rising not as a hope but as a happening. Let us not pretend it is easy. The vultures are circling, the corporations are hungry, the empires are still whispering in halls of power, but for the first time we are whispering back, and louder, and clearer. With every oil rig defended by local soldiers, with every school child reading about hydrocarbons instead of colonial civilizers, we send a message: we are not waiting to be saved, we are saving ourselves. This is Africa Reborn. Africa Reborn is not romantic. It is raw. It is dusty, hands digging trenches. It is mothers starting co-ops with oil dividends. It is students who used to sell oranges, now reading international energy law. It is the belief that our pain has a purpose, and our scars can become stories of strength. In this Africa, reborn security doesn't come from foreign troops. It comes from our own sons and daughters in uniform standing guard over what is ours. Economic growth is not measured by the size of aid packages, but by the number of village entrepreneurs launching with dignity. Progress is no longer dictated from Davos, it's designed in Ouagadougou, in Bamako, in Bobo Dioulasso. I think often of my cousin, the one who died in the Mediterranean. He wanted to come to Europe to build a life, but what if he had lived in the new Africa? What if he had been given land training and belief? He might have built pipelines, not perished in pursuit of promises made by former colonizers. That is why this matters. That is why Africa Rising must be more than a trend. It must be a tide. Because it is not just Burkina Faso. It is Mali, Guinea, Niger, where echoes of sovereignty are no longer whispers but declarations. It is the youth waking up not with fear, but with plans. It is the elders no longer apologizing for being African, but celebrating it. I am no longer afraid to say it. Africa is not behind. Africa is not broken. Africa is not waiting. Africa is rising. Africa is reborn. This is not the Africa of charity. This is the Africa of challenge, of complexity, of creativity. We will make mistakes. We will face resistance. But we will not return to silence. To the world I say, watch closely. To Africans in the diaspora, listen deeply. To my children, remember this moment. Because this is the sound of the soil remembering its strength. This is the fire that colonial borders could not extinguish. This is the light that will outshine every headline of despair. This is Africa rising again, again, and forever again.